Good morning.
Good morning.
I sure do wish we had more visitors with us today, don't you? I had to say something different because everyone else got up and mentioned it, so I had to just say the opposite. It is so good to see some people back with us that don't live here but spend some time here, and some of you have moved back into town or whatever the case is. Just really happy that everybody is here. I don't know if you've ever been blessed to have someone accuse you of doing something that you didn't do. And the feeling afterwards of showing that they were wrong and you're right and you were vindicated. They were wrong about what they said about you and it wasn't true at all. My favorite story, and my dad still brings this up as a joke, was when my dad came home from work and there was a white rag out in the middle of the lawn. And the white rag was from his shop, from his shed where he would do work. And somehow the white rag from his shop had ended up in the middle of the grass. And my father, I don't know why, but he was fully and 100% convinced that I was playing with an old, dirty white rag and left it in the lawn. And I tried to tell him, Dad, why would I play with one of your old greasy white rags and just leave it in the lawn? He goes, I don't know, but that's just something you would do. Which is true, by the way. It is something I would do. But I didn't do it. And it wasn't until my mom finally came and said, David, your son is not going to play with an old greasy rag. Period. Forget where it's at. Probably the dog grabbed it and drug it out into the lawn. And he relented. He was convinced that perhaps it was not me. And I felt, just like the woman in this picture, so vindicated. Just broke the chains that bound me. I don't know if you've ever had an experience where it feels good to know that what you were accused of doing, that the people around you finally realized you didn't do that. That wasn't you. That was someone else or something else. This morning we're going to look at the story of Job. For those of you who are here a lot, you might go, oh, not Job again. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, Job again. We're doing it again. Did I hit the record button on this? Oh, I did. Good. I don't want to get too deep into this because there are many people that want to watch us online. I just know it. Now we're going to look at Job because Job is a man that's accused, and we're not going to read all of Job. Obviously, it's 42 chapters long. It's a pretty long book. But he gets accused of doing some really, really awful things. I mean, just some horrible things. And some of his friends, his best friends, say some of the worst things a person could ever say to another person. And some of you have been on the receiving end of spiritual people who have really bad things to say to you for spiritual reasons, which makes them feel like it's okay. Job, as the story starts, and I'll try and summarize how the story starts. The story of Job starts by God himself saying that Job is blameless and he is upright, or he is righteous. He is a blameless and righteous man. He gets accused later of being righteous because God just keeps blessing him because he has 10 children, he has all these flocks and fields and servants. He's wealthy, he's rich, he's respected. And the character of the Satan or the accuser comes to God and says, of course he's righteous. Look at all the blessings you've given him. Right? If you remember the story. And God says, okay, take all of his blessings away, just don't touch him. And so the Satan says, absolutely, this is going to definitely do it. He's going to be unrighteous and unfaithful as soon as he loses all his blessings. So all of his 10 children, they die. The house collapses and kills all of them. His fields get burned or taken by the Sabians. His children are dead. His flocks are all dead. His servants are all dead. Everything is gone until he's basically left with just him and his wife. And his wife says, why don't you just curse God and die? Just give it up. And Job says, I can't and I won't. So Satan comes back to God again. The Satan comes again and says, okay, that didn't work. But I bet if I touch his body, I bet if I make him sick, then he'll give up. And God says, please go ahead. So he does that too, and he curses him with boils. A lot of things happen to him, but he curses him with boils from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. And that's when Job's 3 friends show up. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, they show up to encourage him. But all they really end up doing is accusing him, because in their mind, the only reason a person would ever suffer such loss, such tragedy, is because their life is so full of sin that of course all these things happen to you. They basically tell Job, you are a walking curse of Deuteronomy. You have been so unfaithful and so untrue to God. And Job will say for roughly 26 chapters, but how? In what way? And they can never actually say in what way, but they just know it's true. It has to be. How could you possibly be sinless, or very sinless, very close to sinless, and still have all these bad things happen? Not possible. It has to be that you're a sinner. It has to be. Actually, one of his friends actually told him when his children were dead, he said, actually, your children deserved much worse than that. That's how bad your sin is. And Job will say, which sin? I don't know which sin. Stop asking me for evidence. Just believe me. You were wrong, Job. They accuse him with Deuteronomy. They throw the book at him. This is a curse from Deuteronomy for someone who's been disobedient to God. The Lord will strike you on the knees and on the legs with grievous boils, of which you cannot be healed, from the sole of your foot to the crown of your head. And that is verbatim what happened to Job. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, boils that could not be cured. And so his friends are saying, this is all the evidence we need. You would not have boils from the soles of your feet to the crown of your head unless you had broken covenant with God in a very serious way. But of course, Job defends himself. But how? I knew you were wondering that. That's why I put this up there. You might be going, but how did Job defend himself? Right? That's what you were thinking? One of you, and not very convincingly, was thinking that. That's all I heard. It's a good question, though, right? How do you defend yourself when you have seemingly and obviously suffered the very curse of God? What is your defense? How can you answer, well, the reason I have boils from the sole of my feet to the crown of my head is, how do you answer that? The reason all my children are dead is, the reason my flocks are gone, my fields are gone, my servants are gone is, how do you answer that question? What's your defense if it's not, I repent of the sin I've done? Because Job is convinced, rightly, that he hasn't done anything to deserve any of it. So Job launches his defense. Chapter 29. Now, I don't remember if we actually covered chapter 29 when we went through the book of Job over a 14-week period. So just be thankful we're going to do it all today. I don't know if we actually covered chapter 29. So Job launches his last defense because he's trying to convince Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar that he is not a man full of sin. But how was he going to do that? So he takes them on a walk down memory lane. We like memory lane. Job again took up his defense. Oh, that I were as in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me. It's the good old days. Right? He starts to remember how life used to be. Before his children were dead, before his fields were gone, before his flocks were gone, before his wife was telling him to curse God and die, before all those things had happened, he says, I remember in the days long past when God watched over my life. When his lamp shone over my head, and by his light I walked through darkness. In other words, there was a darkness all around, but he did not participate in it. He walked in the light. When I was in my prime, the way that I am right now, in my prime, minus some hair, in my prime, he says, when I was in my prime, when the friendship of God was upon my tent, because Job feels somewhat rejected by God. And I'm putting that lightly. There, he actually says, God has filled me with his poisonous arrows, and my body is drunk in the poison, and that's why I am the way I am. He's hurting. But he remembers before all that happened, before God had emptied his quiver into Job. He says, when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when Shaddai was still with me, when my children were around me, when my steps were washed with milk. Now, that might sound like a weird phrase. You don't want to come home and find out that your kids have spilled milk all over your stairs, but this was a good thing. There's so much milk, it's just everywhere. There's plenty. And the rock poured out for me streams of oil. My life was good. I had everything I ever needed. I had everything I ever wanted. My kids were still alive. Life was good. I remember those days. When I went out to the gate of the city, when I took my seat in the square. So we start to learn something about Job here. Job was a leader in his town. Because the people that would take a seat at the city square, those were the judges and the leaders of their times. That was Job. He was a city leader. People knew him, and his life was probably modeled. Everyone wanted to be like Job. Everyone wanted milk pouring on their steps and oil flowing from rocks for them, and their children are blessed, and their fields are blessed, and their flocks. That's what we all want. We want the blessed life. It says, everyone knew me. I sat in the seat in the square. The young men saw me and withdrew. They were so full of respect and almost awestruck. Now, I don't quite understand celebrity sensations that we have. I don't feel like I would go bananas if I saw Dwayne Johnson walk into church. Right? I'd be, I smell what the rock's cooking. That's all I'd say, and I'd move on. But we as people have always had people in our lives, celebrities, that we would just... They would walk in and we would just back away. We wouldn't even know what to do with ourselves. I need to change my analogy. The Beatles. Right? Everyone just went bananas for the Beatles. People fainting at their concerts. Just overwhelmed. Job says, when I walked into town and the young men saw me, they would grow silent and they'd move away. They'd make room for me. Even the aged rose up and stood. Highly respected. Job was highly respected. The nobles refrained from talking and laid their hands on their mouths. Could you imagine? Walking to a room full of nobles, and the young people move away. The older people stand up and rise out of respect. And those who would normally talk and pontificate would put their hand over their mouths and be quiet. The voices of princes were hushed. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar know that everything he's saying is true. Yes, this is how it used to be. And their tongue stuck to the roofs of their mouths. When the ear heard it, his voice, it commended me. And when the eye saw it, it approved. They listened to me and waited and kept silence for my counsel. After I spoke, they did not speak. My word dropped upon them like dew. Job is highly respected. Probably the most respected person anyone at that time had ever encountered. They waited for me as one waits for the rain. They opened their mouths as for the spring rain. In other words, pour your blessings on me, Job. Fill me with your wisdom. Fill me with your knowledge. Fill me with your counsel. Because God is with you and God has blessed you because you are righteous. This is the point he's going to be making, right? All the things you're accusing me of are wrong. Just remember how my life used to be. But why? And I've already given you a hint to this. Why did they do this? Why did they treat Job with such respect and awe? Because he was also the most blameless and upright man they had ever seen or met or heard. But his life takes a turn for the worse, and they all abandon him. And he's going to offer them evidence. I'll go ahead, a little bit ahead of the slides and tell you. He's going to offer them evidence from the book of Deuteronomy that he is righteous. They want to use Deuteronomy against him. He will use it in his own defense. Do you want to know how? Yes. Yeah, right? How's he going to do this? This is wild. This is wild theology 101 right here. You're going to use Deuteronomy against me? I will use Deuteronomy to defend myself. But how is he going to defend himself with the book of Deuteronomy, the very book that says if you have boils on the soles of your feet to the crown of your head, you're cursed by God for disobedience? How is he going to say, no, I'm not, with the same book? Look at you guys are on the edge of your seats. This is amazing. That's probably not true, but whatever. Because I delivered the poor who cried, and the orphan who had no helper. He says, you know I am righteous. You know that you are wrong and that I am right because you have seen me do the very things the book of Deuteronomy, which we covered last week, told me to do. To help the poor, to help the widow, to help the orphan, to help the alien, right? Job says, you know that what you're saying is false because you have seen me fulfill the law. I delivered the poor who cried out, and the orphan who had no helper. The blessing of the wretched came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. He would hear the cases of those who are suffering, the widows. If you remember from the parables we looked at, the widows would come to Job and they would find in Job a righteous judge who would hear their case and he would make their hearts sing for joy as he would give them the justice that they deserved. And Job says, I am righteous because, I'll go back a slide, I delivered those who cried out to me, the poor who cried out, the orphan, I delivered the widow. These are all things Deuteronomy tells Job he has to do to obey the voice of God. Job does not turn to the right or to the left. He stays the course. He stays the course. I put on righteousness. Now, as Christians, we often think of putting on righteousness as putting on the clothing of Christ or covered in the blood of Christ, which is true, but you are declared righteous so that you can live righteous. You're not declared righteous so you can be unrighteous. You're not declared righteous and now you don't have to take care of the poor or the orphan or the widow or the Levite, right? You are declared righteous so that you can be righteous, not so you can be unrighteous. Job says, I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. My righteousness was evident. It was as evident as the clothes a person puts on their body. That's how evident it was that I am righteous. I was a father to the needy, and I championed the cause of the stranger. Every single thing Job says that he did in chapter 29, you will find as a commandment in the book of Deuteronomy. Every single one. And if you remember from last week, we read all of these last week. All these things that he's doing. He is fulfilling the law. How? By being a father to the needy, championing the cause of the stranger or the alien. Job is defended by Deuteronomy. And he tells his friends, and make no mistake, they are his friends, They're a little cruel, or maybe you could say they're very, very cruel, but they are his friends. And they say, look, the book of Deuteronomy says you're a sinner. And he says, actually, the book of Deuteronomy shows that I am a saint. And he's vindicated. At the very end of the book, which we won't read because we've read enough of Job. At the very end of the book, Job makes this complaint in chapter 29. There's some more things that happen. God shows up. He basically runs Job through the ringer, so to speak. And at the end, in chapter 42, around verse 5, 6, he says, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, you don't know me. Job knows me. Job spoke rightly about me. And I'm going to ask Job to pray for you that you can be forgiven. And Job does. And we have a happy ending at the end of Job. As happy an ending as you can have, considering all that happened. The main point I want you to see is when Job is told to prove he is righteous, what does he say? He says, you know that I'm righteous because of really 4 things. Because I took care of the widow, I took care of the orphan, I took care of the poor, and I took care of the stranger. He leaves out Levite, which that's a whole other thing. Forget I said that. He leaves out the Levite, but there's a good reason for that. 4 things that he does. And he gives them back the book of Deuteronomy and says, you see, I told you. My righteousness is as evident as the clothing on my back and the hat on my head. All you have to do is look and see what I have been doing. Which has been a theme we've been going over for a while. Righteousness is something that you do. It's not just something that you are. It's something that you do. Charlene, are you going to come up and make another announcement today? I don't want to steal any thunder here. No? Okay. How many bags did we give out yesterday? Do you remember? So around 65 to 70 bags of food were distributed yesterday. And not light bags. Charlene called me and had to bring in the big guns to carry the heavy bags. That's right, you heard me. The big guns. Because we're trying to bless the poor. We're trying to do righteousness. Not just believe that we are righteous, but actually do righteousness. Righteousness is something that we do. Now remember, next Sunday, all of these sermons have been leading up to this. They culminate in this. We have a very unique opportunity next Sunday. We're going to be picking up a special offering, special collection, and all of that is going to go to Orphans International Lifeline, or Lifeline International. All of it. Well, we're going to take 2 collections, one a regular and then a special collection. All of the special collection is going to go to Orphans Lifeline International. Because they are doing righteousness. They're doing it. And we might not have great avenues to help orphans, given our cultural context and where we're at. But we can do this. We can do this. We can give. Once a year we do this. Once a year. We have other opportunities like handing out of food every month that we also do to try and be righteous, to do righteousness. But this is one special opportunity, one time a year, where we get to give to something that we know. And if we didn't know it, we know it now. It is an act of righteousness. Where we get to put our faith in action. We get to live a righteous life, not just be righteous, but live it. And also remember, if there was ever a time to buckle down and give a little more than maybe you normally would, next Sunday is the time. Because remember, for every dollar you give, there's another church that's going to give 50 cents toward every dollar you give, up to $300,000. So if you want to add 50% to whatever you give, next Sunday is a great time to do it. As long as we've been doing this, no church has ever offered to do this much. Has never offered to encourage other churches to give a little more. But make no mistake, we are still called to be the righteousness of God. We're still called to be it and to do it, not just to believe it, but to do it. Amen? Amen. If you're visiting with us and you didn't want to give today, that's great. Next Sunday, give to that special contribution. Give the special contribution. Okay, I promise I am done now.